I can talk. I can talk firsthand on this. Phil had a van or Suburban every baseball game or practice, and the most I ever had was 2 kids ride down, and nobody ever rode back. So it was a bit late.
We had that during basketball. In fact, we had a bus driver walk in and say, is there any athletes from Wally View Auburn that need to go back down there? And there wasn't one. So he drove all the way up here, found out there was no one to get on the bus, and drove all the way back.
Right.
Well, then I started calling their cell phones to tell them, no, you don't need to come up because there's nobody here. But that's,
and he had one for softball and one for baseball, and a lot of days, not a lot of days, a couple times 2 girls showed up and no boys, so I took the girls down, and nobody come back. So yeah, you're right. That's a huge cost that was not getting utilized.
And not Ann, I'll just keep going. I was going to say something, but it'll show up here later. We're going to use vans and have coaches drive when it's practical. In other words, if we've got 40 kids to take, we're not going to put 6 in a van and have this caravan of 8 school vans. We don't have 8 good school vans between the 2 districts, by the way, but we take a bus. If we've got 12 or 14 kids and we've got a couple of coaches between a Suburban and a vehicle, we could have 2 coaches drive, and we've got things taken care of when that's practical to do. So that'll be on a case-by-case basis. Someone at the meeting at Wally View Auburn said, well, aren't you just going to have kind of one flat statement? You really can't have that, because you can't say for basketball it's always going to be X, because sometimes we may have a boys game only, which is a varsity and a JV. It may be a boys and girls game. It may be that cheerleaders are going or not going. So there's kind of a number of different scenarios to talk about related to it. But every one of those will be reviewed to make sure that we're taking the most efficient form of transportation. Our coaches, if they drive a vehicle, get paid, and that's part of our master contract agreement. And if you remember, that was part of each district had a little bit of compensation, but we agreed to equal compensation this year. If a coach drives a bus to a competition, Troy Burt drives a football bus to Southern Cal to play varsity football or JV football, he gets $25 for, I'm just making his name up, but he does have a CDL, but he drives that, it's $25. If a coach or a sponsor drives a van, they get $15, and if they drive a vehicle that takes kids back and forth to practice, they get $10. Honestly, that's a huge cost savings not to have drivers doing that. And the other thing, if you remember earlier what I said to you, we don't have very many drivers. We have no access. So if a driver's got to run a regular route at the end of the day, sometimes activities are leaving before the end of that day, and those coaches have to be able to do it. One of the areas that we're very short of coaches having CDLs is on our high school track teams. Of our 4 coaches, none of them have CDLs, so we'll probably try to talk to them about that, Mike, and see if we can make a little impact there. So, and track would be one of those activities where you leave at 3 in the afternoon and you get home at 10 at night, and you've got a driver sitting a lot of time at those activities. So coaches with CDLs drive as much as possible. We did talk about whether we could charge for transportation, and we cannot. Any school-sponsored activity or curriculum-related trip, there cannot be a fee for it. Schools can take donations if someone wanted to donate money, but we cannot charge a fee for it. And then that last item, number 3, we're going to be asking coaches to consider acquiring CDL licenses, just because we just really have that need. I worked in a school district where the superintendent just kind of kept a gauge on how many coaches had CDLs, and then we hired teachers that might coach, or just coaches. Sometimes the requirement of the contract was that you had a CDL, and we could do that. We could say this next assistant football coach that we hired has to have a CDL. That's well within our rights to be able to say that we want to have that happen.
Do we have to pay for that then?
Like we do with the rest of it. We pay for the initial upfront cost, and they drive 3 times, and they paid that back to us. So that's taken care of. But, I think next month I'll come to you with some prices for some vans. We really think we could use a couple more good vans in each school district. Wall Lakeview Auburn, we'll use a Wall Lakeview Auburn van, but we're going to be transporting 3 kids in our district, SAC kids and Wall Lakeview Auburn kids, to the Boys and Girls Home every day because we don't have special ed for them. And we tried to hire a teacher, but had no suitable applicants. So we'll buy one of those vans at Wall Lakeview Auburn special ed, and we'll buy a second van more than likely. And we really think we could use 2 more at SAC as well, because we're going to use vans when we can. We may ask parents to help out once in a while. I talked to Dave Weige today and said, you know, it'd be nice if we had took a couple of vans, if you could ask a couple sets of parents that we're going to go to drive vans and take kids with you. He said, I know parents would show up at the same time we're leaving and put 5 girls in each one of those, and all of a sudden we don't have a bus going anywhere and a driver all day.
Is there any liability issues with that on a school sponsored if something would happen in a personal?
You're talking, I'd be more interested if the parents are insured on school vehicles. Because that's what you're saying, take a school vehicle?
No, I was saying,
you're saying take your personal vehicle.
We could do either one. If we had enough vehicles and if it was economically feasible to do it, we could ask you to drive a school van. We just have to have a copy of your valid driver's license, and then you're insured and all the kids are insured under the school's insurance in our school van. If you drove your own van and took 3 or 4 kids with you, all we have to have is proof of your insurance, and kids are covered under your insurance, and then there's that umbrella of liability that's on our insurance. When we take our beginnergarten kids to the zoo, Cindy drives the school van, and then there's usually about 4 or 5 parents who drive, and kids ride with them. And
So we're okay then?
And we're okay. Yep. Yep. In fact, I had an insurance meeting this spring that Larry Payton and Gene Oden from Wall Lake, who Wall Lakeview Auburn has their insurance with. It's all through EMC. We all heard the same thing. Here's what you have to have on file. If you're going to drive your vehicle, I have to have your proof of insurance and your license. And if you're going to drive one of ours, I have to have a copy of your license on file before you leave. That Chicago trip that seniors took, and generally the parents help part of the driving. We just get a copy of their driver's license and have it on file, and they can drive school vehicles, and they're okay. So we know insurance-wise what we're suggesting here works, and that we're all right with it. When I presented this information at Wall Lakeview Auburn, a couple of the board members are like, wow, this is going to be hard on some families. And I'm like, you know, a couple of examples I can think of. If you go to the far northeast, southeast, northwest, southwest corners of any of our of either of our districts, we have families that already commit to a lot of driving. We have families that never think a thing of dance lessons in Denison and Carroll, and they commit to that, and we're not asking them to drive any further than that. The other thing is, this is out of general fund, and if we don't tighten this up, we're going to have to look at staff that we reduce to pay for the transportation bill. And you know what? Frankly, I don't have any intention of coming to you to let that happen, because we should not have to reduce a staff member to pay the transportation costs. So we're going to try to tighten this up, all of it, as much as we can. Season by season, it will look different from one season to the other. It will look different on a Saturday probably than it does on a weekday about what the decision is. But Phil and Tully and I have decided that we can look a couple weeks in advance and know exactly where we're at with all these things. We can let our middle school kids, who have the biggest problems with communication, it seems like, about knowing where they're supposed to be and what's going to go on and how we look at that. We feel like we have to do this. And you're going to field some questions from people, and I just wanted you to know where we were and what we were looking at. Questions, comments?
Well, I think probably the biggest concern will be to those Wall Lakeview Auburn parents who have kids in middle school, that we now no longer have shuttles after practice. We have football practice, they have to come get their kids. We have basketball practice.
We get them back to Lakeview, but we don't take them to Wall Lake and to Auburn.